The Facebook fallout just keeps building, with a second whistleblower now willing to testify before Congress over her concerns about hate and misinformation on that popular social media platform, particularly from dictators in developing countries.
It was very frustrating for me. I started losing sleep. The fact that multiple national governments and presidents felt the need to exploit Facebook on vast scales to manipulate their own citizenry without even trying to hide, that speaks volumes about how important they believed it to be, how important it actually is.
Data scientist Sophie Zhang first shared her concerns in a public memo last year after she was fired from Facebook, saying she felt like she had, quote, blood on her hands, end quote. She said on Twitter she's also given detailed documentation regarding potential criminal violations to a U.S. law enforcement agency and believes an investigation is still ongoing. Zhang's concerns are also shared by fellow Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen, who testified before a Senate panel last week.
I believe Facebook's consistent understaffing of the counterespionage, information operations, and counterterrorism teams is a national security issue. They have put their astronomical profits before people.
Haugen also testified at length about the negative effects Facebook-owned Instagram has had on young girls, with many both addicted to and hurt by some of the platform's content. She said the company knows all about it, but instead of taking serious action, it's been, quote, operating in the shadows, hiding its research from public scrutiny. In response, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg posted on the platform in part, many of the claims don't make any sense. If we wanted to ignore research, why would we create an industry-leading research program to understand these important issues in the first place? We care deeply about issues like safety, well-being, and mental health. Many have been questioning that statement in light of everything the whistleblowers have shared, and this latest scandal is making some of us rethink our relationship with the company altogether. But as we learned last week, when Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp all went dark for several hours and half the internet lost its collective mind, that's easier said than done. My next guest has a few tips, which she laid out in a Washington Post article titled, "You've Decided to Quit Facebook. Here's how to migrate your online life elsewhere." That would be Washington Post technology reporter Heather Kelly, who joins me now. Heather, thanks for joining us.
Sure thing.
Heather, I feel like we needed to have this prenup conversation 15 years ago, as we were building all of our vacation photos and our social life and all of our groupings on Facebook. You lay out a pretty clear step-by-step things that we should consider, but what's the first step about thinking, should I break up with Facebook and, by association, Instagram?
I think the biggest thing to think about is there is no way to recreate Facebook. You can find some of these people elsewhere, but what we've basically done over the past 14 years is we've allowed Facebook to own this map of our friends, what they call the social graph. A very small percentage of all the people you're friends with are probably in your contacts book, like maybe written down or on your phone. Most of it is just on Facebook, and it's not easy to get that from the company. So know what you're giving up when you leave. Know who you need to find alternate contact information for, and understand that some people might not go with you.
I had over the years, I've had periods where I've gone dark, where I've kept my Facebook account, but I've deactivated, I think is what they call it, and it made me very anxious. I'm ashamed to say that I was worried that I was missing things. I was worried people were trying to get in contact with me. I mean, we keep talking about it as a utility, and it should be, some people think should be regulated like a utility, but it's so much more than that. I mean, it's almost like we're artificial intelligence merged with it, right?
Yeah, and it also depends where you live. Like for us, we always think, oh, this is where I find my friends' babies and dogs. But if you think about WhatsApp, which is owned by Facebook, as some people forget, that's how people communicate in a lot of countries. Like that is their text message system. That's where their families are. And so asking them to give up something like that is also a much bigger deal than just asking somebody, hey, maybe don't check Facebook anymore.
Okay, so let's say that we take the step. We say, all right, I think I want to disengage from the Borg, if you will, for a little Star Trek William Shatner shout out today. What should you do? What's like one step you should take as you start to take inventory about breaking up with Facebook?
So my first suggestion is don't just delete Facebook first and then decide to move. You're going to need that information as you're moving to other apps. Also, look at what you use Facebook for. I think one of the hardest things to leave behind are these groups that people have made on Facebook. Getting those people off is going to be very difficult. So talk to your group if you're on there. Find out what other people are on, what they're comfortable with. Sometimes, especially if it's like older users, they're not going to be comfortable learning something entirely new. So you have to kind of talk them through it or decide to stay. And then the next step is finding where you want to go. And you can use something called Facebook Login, ironic, I know, for an app like TikTok, and it will automatically find all of your Facebook friends on there first. So do all of that before you decide to actually delete Facebook and make that leap.
All right, so what about all of our photos? What about all of the, I'm always checking my photos to see what I might have posted there that I really care about. And then I realize when I look at the time hop function, well, gee, that photo isn't really in my photos. Am I going to have to go through day by day? I mean, I've been with Facebook almost since the beginning. Am I going to have to look at every single day of posts, of which in the beginning I was a bit crazy about, in order to see if there's anything I want to capture? And what do I do? Download it? Do I upload it? Do I put it in the cloud? What do I do?
You don't have to manually relive your early years on Facebook.
Thank goodness. Thank you for that.
I actually did this recently. If you go into settings, there is an option to export all of your photos, and not just to a file on your desktop. You can put them directly in another service like Dropbox. I moved all of mine to Google Photos because I'm a big Google Photos fan. I'm sure there's questions about that company as well, but it really works for me. And I just pressed a button and I waited a really, really long time. And now they're all in a new location. And then I went through and I deleted it all from my old Facebook account.
One of the relationships that's been very fraught is that with newspapers and news organizations. There was a time where Facebook pretended they were going to be the newspaper's new best friend and then totally dumped everybody. A lot of people get both misinformation and accurate information on Facebook. I don't think that there's very many people who pick up the newspaper every morning or go sometimes directly to their local news sources. They go to Facebook first and then find those links. How do you recalculate your brain if you're not going to go to Facebook first anymore? Where should you go to find the collective of all of the news sources that you may want to see every day?
I mean, obviously, I recommend your news source and my news source first.
Obviously.
But after that, so depending on Google or Apple, both have built-in news products that are fine. They're good. They are actually doing a way better job of blocking misinformation than any sort of Facebook algorithm. Apple has Apple News, and it's attractive to look at. It features a lot of, the basic news that you would find on Facebook, but without the bad parts. And the same goes for Google News, which you can also access on an iPhone or on the web. I also use Twitter, but the success of that really depends on who you follow. If you're only following trustworthy sources, if you're actually following the news outlets themselves.
Let's talk about Instagram a little bit, because the challenge around Instagram and Facebook is it's sort of emblematic of what happens when there's a new social media platform that's emerging and then Facebook gobbles it up. Can you just explain for folks who don't understand why it's concerning that Facebook owns Instagram and what it might mean for TikTok in the future?
So Facebook has a long history of finding features somebody else is doing well, say a smaller company, and just blatantly copying it. Instagram, however, was a different case. They paid, I believe, $1 billion, which back in the day was a huge deal. And now it's just pennies for these tech companies. So they paid $1 billion for Instagram to just buy up the competitor. Nowadays, what it's doing with Instagram and with Facebook is it's just copying features from Snapchat, from TikTok. If you look at Instagram Reels, it's almost entirely TikToks that have been reposted. They even have a little watermark on them. And so the thing is, Facebook has such a large reach, it can easily kill these other companies. They don't really stand a chance. Although TikTok's doing okay right now, I think. Yeah,
TikTok has really carved out a very a wide variety of lanes in a number of highways, not to kill a metaphor there. But, Instagram, too, is fascinating to me because I spend all my time talking to young women and female teenagers in my life saying, that's a filter, that's professionally lit, she is wearing makeup, you can't lose weight that fast. And I'm reminded that my mother spoke to me the same way about magazines and television, but my mother didn't have to speak to me about it every hour on the hour. And it really seems the burden on parents right now of being tech experts is really kind of crushing. Do you think there might be a backlash that parents might just say, you know what, you can't have any of these apps, no matter how much fun they are? or are we just going to adapt with it and grow with it as we sometimes have in the past?
So much honestly depends on the kid and the parents, but I talked to some parenting experts about this last week, and they all said that you don't want to just go and immediately delete Instagram. These are 13 to 18-year-old kids. They're going to find a way to look at Instagram if that's something they really want to do. And all you're doing is cutting off this conversation with them, which again is way more frequent than our parents had about beauty magazines. But you can make it a condition of them keeping it. Like, let me know who you're following. Let me look at your feed every now and then with permission. Let's talk about what you're seeing and how that could be damaging. And I think that seems to be, for most parents and children, a slightly smarter approach.
Heather, I don't want to gloss over the WhatsApp part, because I think that WhatsApp is so essential, as you mentioned, to other folks in other countries. And it was a lot of joking when Facebook went down, coincidentally, we hope, during the testimony in front of Congress. But WhatsApp is an absolute lifeline to many people. Can you just expand on that a little bit so people understand it's not just all baby pictures and pictures of their food?
So WhatsApp sort of fills in this blank that has been created by cellular companies. Like, we can't just text people SMS text messages in other countries without paying a little more money. And so these apps have come along that can work over cellular or Wi-Fi that let you text anybody in the world just for the cost of whatever your connection is. You're not paying extra. And so they've switched entire, like, families are over there, large groups, friends, everybody in some countries is basically communicating over WhatsApp, some other similar apps like Line or Viber in the Philippines. And without that, they're going to have to find an entirely new platform to communicate with all of these people for that same sort of non-existent price.
If a social media company could have an attitude, I felt like when the outage was happening last week that Twitter certainly was having a smug moment. And I imagine the folks over at Google were too. What are other platforms saying about the scrutiny that Facebook is under, and Instagram and WhatsApp? What's their reaction to what's happening?
I mean, publicly, not a lot. I feel like something like YouTube, which is owned by Google, is probably just very happy that people are paying attention to all the other places that misinformation is being spread than its own platform. It successfully sort of ducks a lot of the scrutiny, and is a very odd that happens because so much misinformation is spread, especially to children, on YouTube. Twitter had a little fun, but I think also the risks are lower for Twitter. Like, it has vastly fewer users. And I think on all of these tech companies, like tech teams, there was just terror. Like, what if this happened to us? This is a worst case scenario, probably some empathy, I would hope. But Twitter did have a little fun at Facebook's expense.
Yeah, I mean, and I know I'm not a tech expert, but the idea that Facebook had all of its tech eggs in one basket was a little horrifying to everyone. As we wrap up, do you have a prediction? I mean, I keep reading different opinion pieces, one saying, okay, that's it, it's the end for Facebook, they're on the decline now, or Facebook just got slapped, but nothing's going to change. What's your take on what the future of Facebook is?
I think what you've discovered is that it's an absolute mystery and nobody really knows, but you have to consider Facebook has nearly 3 billion users around the world. And just simply like asking them all to leave or expecting them to be so mad about it this time that they're going to give up and go to another platform is not really realistic. So I think, yeah, it could hurt Facebook a little, but so far it's shown that it's kind of Teflon when it comes to these accusations, whistleblowers, concerns, Cambridge Analytica, privacy issues. People are still joining Facebook and people are still on all of its apps.
I mean, I remember when they would change the feed, 10 years ago, and people would be posting, you can't do this to us, we're going to quit. And I remember thinking, I don't think you people are ever going to quit. And you're complaining, and they don't care that you're complaining that the chronological feed is no longer what you're getting. And it is an amazing thing. And we're happy, Heather Kelly, that you are on top of it. So I appreciate you joining us and keeping us posted on our prenup that we should have for our next social media. I don't know what we'll call it. Won't be prenup, but we'll come up with something. Thank you, Heather.
Awesome. Thank you.